now and again you look at this and it'll say, yeah, you can crank up both sides, and you'll crank up both sides with the consultant study and the permission from the FCC, and somebody will call up and say, you're walking all over us on our 60 dBu. Well, at this point, the remediation procedure puts the onus on you at that point to drop it back down to -14. You
mentioned along the rise. Frank has a program for along the rise. Some Canadian broadcast companies do the along the rise. They have a whole line along the rise calculator.
Yep, that is, this was outside of the scope of this conversation, but if we go back to this free RF toolkit, you see this thing called radio coverage tool? We haul this up, and the company, I don't know, I think we give them credit for them in here somewhere. Anyway, they developed it, and this is what it's based on. The company's out of Montreal.
Yeah, it's right there in the top of the second paragraph, the second line down.
ircov.crc.ca.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, well, that's based on Longley Rise. But anyway, there was a coverage or company out of Montreal, and with this, you can load in your transmitter type, your power level, your frequency, your height above terrain or height above ground, and it'll plot you a coverage map. The cool thing about it is you can also use it for figuring out STL paths. And it is based on SRTM databases, so it is pretty accurate. Okay. And I also get a report of everybody that uses that every month. And I promise not to email you because of that either. All right, so those are both available on the support section of our website under free RF calculators or whatever. And you certainly feel free to use them anytime you want, but I say that's kind of out of the scope of what we're looking at here. Oops, yeah, I didn't want to go from beginning. Close enough. Okay, so we showed this earlier, and how we can't walk into the protected contour of another station, and if they're on the first adjacent, that's an issue. Do the studies first. Look, I didn't even have to load it up. It was already in here, but makes more sense to pick local stations.
Can you negotiate out if both of you don't fit? Is there any kind of tolerance like contour protection? Can you do it?
Well, theoretically, and I emphasize theoretically, unless one of you are a Super B or one of the superpowers, you can go to -14 regardless, period. Everybody can go to -14 on both sides. When it comes to going above that to the -10, that's when the interference contours come into play. The other thing I was going to mention, I just remembered, if you're at 88.1 or at 107.9, your outside sidebands can never be increased. Now, I'm not sure why they limited the 88.1. 107.9 makes sense because the first adjacent's 108.1, and then you're stepping into the aircraft band theoretically. Yeah, I suppose we don't want to mess with those Franken FMs. All right, just for grins and giggles, we were asking, Dave, you were asking about asymmetric earlier? This is a study that one of our guys did on Tampa St. Petersburg and what every station in the market could go to. So as you can see, using asymmetry, I mean, you got a total of 15 stations there, and all of them but one can increase above the -14. Whether they're using asymmetry and increasing only one sideband, or whether they can bring both up. But everybody was able to get some increase. All right, this talks about the interference. Like I said, first step is, hey, call the guy up, hey, you're stepping on me in my primary contour. And that's the caveat. You're only guaranteed protection in your primary contour. All right, so if you're used to serving a market that's in your 50 dBu but not in your 60, and somebody lights up HD and walks all over it, well, it sucks to be you. Now, in a lot of cases, they may voluntarily reduce that sideband anyway to be a good neighbor, but there's no legal requirement for it. Okay? The other thing that they mention is in order to file a complaint with the FCC, you need 6 documented complaints, and those complaints cannot be from station employees. That's important. Because I've been in a couple of markets where you'd be hard-pressed to find 6 listeners that weren't station employees to some stations. All right? And if you're running an LPFM or a translator, well, again, it sucks to be you if you get walked on by an HD. All right? Then again, some stations will voluntarily work with you anyway. Some, not so much. There is no requirement for it. Okay, they do have the notification procedure. The forms are online at CDBS. This is if you want to do anything over -14, the consultant, this is basically what he does. He runs the same study on that's on our website, but probably with a current database instead of information that could be 2 weeks or a month old or 2 months. And he files the request, and the FCC typically rubber stamps it. Hey, now, if you're running -20 and want to make it bigger, typically things are going to change unless you designed a lot of headroom in there to begin with. I've run into a lot of stations where they built for -20 and then they wanted to go -14 and there was just no room at all. And like I said, 5 years after you spent a couple of $100 grand to go HD is not the time to be asking for a bigger transmitter because you misjudged or because, plain and simple, nobody told you that it was going to get bigger. Yo, Dave.
Well, I mean, also, all the manufacturers didn't know this.
No, that's right.
There was no inkling of it, except that there was questions in many manufacturers.
Well, we said from the beginning -20 wasn't enough.
This
But-
drove us crazy because
Yep.
all of a sudden they throw this in there and we've got to go back and skip through designing something. We were last to do our transmitters and the first to do higher power and hybrid.
Yep.
But the fact being, though, is that if we'd known that, we would have gone ahead and designed a new transmitter.
That's right. That's right. And that's why our Env Series come out for the same reason, because we got FCC said, oh, we're thinking about turning this up. And it's,
I think it was a conspiracy.
oh, no, you're right. It was. It absolutely certainly.
Committee on this.
You will never convince me otherwise that it wasn't. I mean, they went with -20 because it was such a low level that nobody thought to fuss about it. They got in there and then they said, oh, that's not enough.
Well, also they didn't want to consider the volume.
You know, give them 50 miles an hour and they want 70.
Is it now possible to go to -9, -6, or?
Right now, no. In the future, who knows? I mean, the transmitters can do it. The headroom's there. Yeah. Yeah.
Reduce your analog power.
I mean, the long-term plan is exactly like Tom says. Shut the analog totally off, run a double sideband, suppressed carrier, 8 channels of digital modulation, no analog whatsoever. You can do that at a quarter power, drop your power bill, and still have superior coverage to what your analog's got. All the multipath's gone and all the interference between stations is gone. Okay, that's the long-term solution. But there ain't no receivers out there that'll pick it up right now. Who wants to be the guy broadcasting FM to a whole bunch of cows without receivers? You know, so that's the reason that this whole hybrid system got forced to begin with instead of just going to a straight digital platform. Because nobody wants to spend the money to broadcast something that nobody can hear. Okay.
Well, it's interesting that you find all these frequencies for LPFMs and couldn't just put digital in there and lower bandwidth.
Yeah, why didn't they just do an FM equivalent of docket 8090 and shoehorn a whole bunch more FM directionals in there? That would have been fun. Okay, I'm going to shut the sarcasm mode off now. All right. One of the things, if you're running the hybrid injector and you want to increase, one thing you can potentially do is increase or change your injection ratio. That would mean a new injector, but it might be a whole lot less expensive if you've got the transmitter headroom than buying new transmitters. Space combining. remember we were talking about you got to worry about the isolation between them. All right? Just because you got two antennas 30 feet apart on a tower doesn't mean that you got enough isolation to keep from interfering with each other. Ideally, you will have a minimum of 40 dB of isolation. Anything less than that, you need a circulator. I mean, it's not even a question at that point. With 40 dB, you might need a circulator. You better budget for it when you're planning it, because it would really be bad to find out after the fact you did need it and have to go back to the pond for another 30 grand.
Find another job.
Yeah, it gets expensive. All right, so this is something you definitely want to be aware of if you're doing space combining, over and above what I talked about before with the pattern replication. Me, I think you should just buy a new transmitter from me or Dave. I'm easy like that. There you go. All right. Remember, full wave versus half wave antennas, you can space half waves a little closer together and maintain the same isolation as with full waves because, well, wavelength is wavelength. You can't defeat physics. Myatt's got this new low-loss combiner. Now, like I said, this bad boy is about 12 feet across by 5 feet wide by 6 feet high. It's not small. It is low loss. You lose about 1.8 dB into the digital input and about 0.5 dB into the analog input, as I recall. So it does give you an option for a separate transmitter solution if you've got the headroom to cover the combiner losses. They're not cheap. Last I priced, they were somewhere in the area of 55 grand for a medium power one. I think they make low, medium, and high. I'm not sure. ERI does. Okay. We've got a little calculator on our website. You can take a picture of it, but that's obsolete information because we replaced that model number at NAB. But one of the things you'll find is that as you increase your injection ratio, like I've been saying, your transmitter power decreases significantly. Now with the Env series that we used to have, and look, see the fine print? Like I told you, SWR 1.05 to 1. Does it give me the MP? It does not in this one. But they usually will, if they don't specify the operating mode, MP1, MP3, make sure you talk to your manufacturer. If I was you and I was looking at this chart right now and it said I could do 20.7 with a NV40 at -10 and I needed to do 20 kilowatts, I'd be picking up the phone to make sure I could do that 20 kilowatts. Because I can promise you, if it does it at 1.05, it's not going to be doing it into a 1.2 or 1.5 to 1 SWR. All right, so that's something to keep in the back of your mind too. Attention to specifications. This was what I was talking about earlier. There have been cases where the power level you've been given on a spec sheet is combined power. So somebody will say, yeah, we can do 11.5 kilowatts at -10 with a 20 kilowatt. What they mean is we can do 10.5 analog and 1.05 HD. Well, if your analog TPO is 11 kilowatts, you're going to come up on the short end of the straw with this one. All right, so always, always, always make sure that you're talking apples and apples. Okay, little plug for our new GV series. I say we've done a lot to get the efficiencies up. If we look compared to the NV20, we had at -10 analog power 10.5. GV20 at -10, now we got 13 analog power. This spec sheet, by the way, is at MP1 mode at 1.05 to 1 SWR, and this is MP3 at 1.1. Like I say, you've got to look for this fine print. Okay, our marketing guys at least put this on here. I don't know if everybody else's does. I got no idea because I couldn't tell you. I've never looked at a Harris spec sheet. I got no reason to. Okay, I've never looked at Continental spec sheet. I'm sure Dave doesn't waste a lot of time looking at Nautel spec sheets. Do you, Dave?
Maybe 3 hours a week.
Oh, see. Well, when you work 90 hours a week like he does, that's not a lot of time. Okay, now the other thing you'll see is that efficiency, as you increase, remember we're amplitude modulating an FM transmitter. So as you increase injection ratio, the efficiency goes down. I picked 3 of our different models just to show some of the differences. The older ones, like I said, between 88 megahertz and 98 megahertz, there's a significant difference in both headroom and efficiency. Right? This is all stuff that you need to be talking to your manufacturer about. Doesn't matter whether it's us, Continental, or Gates Air, Gates Air or BE. Anybody else making HD gear in North America these days? I don't think so, right? I think I got us all. Okay, so things that can improve your D rating, the peak to average power reduction, Nautel power boost, whatever. Harris has got something, what do they call that, crest factor reduction? Harris has got something similar, so it gives you a little more headroom. Asymmetric sideband gives you the chance to optimize your power, get as much watts as you can based on what you can do without stepping on the neighbors. Power optimizer is the thing in our new product I was talking about that automatically balances, it dynamically biases the amplifiers. So it looks at the mask instantaneously, compares the efficiency, and adjusts the PA volts to clear the mask by as much as you specify to keep the efficiency up. Like I said, like having a little Frank Foti in there continuously adjusting for best AM noise. Okay, the PAPR reduction, this is what I was talking about when you add all these vectors on here. What we're doing now on hybrid systems is instead of doing the peak reduction here, we've moved it over to there at the combined system. So we're looking at both. It gives us the ability to give a more accurate correction and give you better headroom. Okay, I think this is true, Dave. I didn't write this, so if I'm wrong, holler now. Well, shoot, that's no help at all. As a rule, based on published spec sheets, the tube transmitters do tend to derate a little faster. They do. Exactly. Yeah, and it comes back to the, do you want to run your tube hot and it don't live as long, or do you want to run your solid state hot and cook it? Either way, something's going to cook. All right? When you're running in extended hybrid mode, again, MP1311, you may need to add a lot more power headroom. Okay, and this comes back to what we were talking about before. Remember also, if you're running a 92 kilohertz SCA sitting right about here on your baseband, extended mode is going to step on it. Promise you it will. Okay, so there's a little more. We're going to reinforce that a little bit more. Plug. I should add that that's an obsolete model line, but it was the picture I had available at the time. All right, any questions?